The rain came down in sheets over Fulton County, the courthouse steps slick with water and camera flashes cutting through the gray. Jasmine Washington didn't slow her pace as she crossed the plaza, the heels of her boots clicking sharp against the stone. She carried no umbrella, no companion, just a thick stack of papers tucked under one arm, wrapped in a manila folder that might as well have been a live grenade. The photographers at the bottom of the steps didn't have to guess what it was. They could see the embossed seal peeking from the edges. The moment they spotted her face, they started shouting questions, and she let them. Every flash, every lens aimed at her was part of the point. She wasn't sneaking in, she was making an entrance. Inside, the air was warmer, but the tension was just as thick. Security barely glanced at her ID before waving her through, and by the time she reached the clerk's window, the crowd behind her had swelled with reporters pretending to wait in line. She slid the folder forward, her voice steady. "Civil complaint," she said. "Defendant, Rasheeda Buckner-Frost." The words echoed down the marble hall like the opening note of a song everyone knew was about to explode. By the time she turned from the counter, a courthouse staffer had already texted someone, and outside, a notification popped up on half the phones in Atlanta. Breaking, Jasmine Washington sues Rasheeda Frost. The push alerts rolled out faster than anyone could read them, and gossip blogs rushed to post the first blurry shots from the courthouse lobby. Inside the filing were claims that Rasheeda had deliberately interfered with Jasmine's income, planted false stories in the press, and used her influence to block business deals connected to Jasmine's name. It wasn't a light accusation. It was an outright declaration of war. The crowd outside the courthouse doubled in size in under an hour, umbrellas jostling for space as camera crews set up tripods in the rain. Drivers slowed just to roll down their windows and yell, "Get her, Jasmine," while others muttered that she had finally lost her mind. The city was split, and that was before the influencers weighed in. Across town, Rasheeda was in the glass-walled conference room of her attorney's office when her phone lit up with the first headline. She read it twice before passing it to the lawyer beside her, her nails tapping against the tabletop. The room went quiet except for the hum of the air conditioner. The attorney scanned the article, then slid it back. "We knew she might try something," he said carefully. Rasheeda leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "Yeah, but I didn't think she'd be dumb enough to do it in the middle of everything else." Miss Charlene sat near the end of the table, sipping tea like she'd been waiting for this moment. "Well, she did," she said flatly. "Now what?" Rasheeda's eyes narrowed, her mind already racing. "Now we file. Counterclaim, injunction. Whatever it takes. I'm not giving her an inch." The attorney nodded, pulling a legal pad closer. "She's aiming for headlines. We'll give her headlines, and court orders." In a parked SUV 2 blocks from the courthouse, Tasha K adjusted her mic and went live. Rain streaked across her windshield, but her smile was pure sunshine. "What did I tell y'all?" she said, her voice cutting over the background noise. "I told you this saga wasn't over, and now look, Jasmine just walked her fine self into Fulton County and dropped a lawsuit on Rasheeda like it was hot tea." Her chat went wild, hearts and flame emojis flooding the screen. She held up her phone, flashing the headline for anyone who hadn't seen it yet. "Defamation, harassment, business interference, this girl didn't come to play. And if you think this is just about money? Baby, this is about revenge served in a court docket." She promised to have exclusive receipts by the evening, her voice dipping into that conspiratorial tone her audience lived for. The comments rolled in, half cheering Jasmine on, half warning her she was about to make herself a bigger target than she could handle. Inside the jail, Kirk Frost was stretched out on his bunk when a guard slid a folded printout through the bars. It was a news article, grainy photo and all, showing Jasmine on those courthouse steps. He stared at it for a long moment before tossing it onto the thin mattress beside him. His cellmate glanced over. "That your girl?" Kirk didn't answer. He was thinking about the tattooed visitor from 2 nights ago, about the note that had said, "We move before the weekends," and about how Jasmine filing her own lawsuit was either a coincidence or the messiest kind of coordination. Either way, it meant the storm outside was growing, and even from in here, he could feel the walls tightening. Jasmine left the courthouse without rushing, stopping just long enough at the top of the steps to let the cameras get their shot. She didn't speak, but the look on her face was louder than any statement. In the distance, the sirens wailed as if on cue, and somewhere across town, a different kind of game was being played. Rasheeda's lawyers were already drafting their counterattack. Tasha K was on live for the 3rd time that day. And in the Frost Bistro, a delivery man dropped off a sealed envelope addressed to management, the first notice of court oversight on the restaurant. The week wasn't even halfway over, and the board was already shifting. The storm didn't let up, it just learned new tricks. By late afternoon the rain turned into a fine mist that hung over the city like static, and every phone screen in Atlanta felt electrically charged. In the glass conference room, Rasheeda's attorney slid a draft across the table with tabs in 3 colors. We file a special motion to strike, call it what you want, the point is we treat this like a publicity suit and flip it. We add a counterclaim for tortious interference and move for a temporary restraining order around online harassment and false statements. We ask for expedited discovery, but only on our terms. He spoke like a metronome, she listened like a surgeon. I want the bistro ring-fenced, she said, eyes on the window where the skyline bled into gray. New banking controls, independent manager reports to the court every 48 hours. If she thinks she's going to use my name to shake loose sponsors or spook employees, let her learn what real governance looks like. Miss Charlene muttered, amen, without looking up from her phone, then read aloud a comment thread where half the city insisted Jasmine was about to expose a vault and the other half swore she'd just locked herself inside one dot across town. Jasmine sat in the back of a rideshare with the privacy screen up, watching a loop of her own face crossing the courthouse lobby. The car smelled like lemon wipes and fabric softener. On her lap, a second phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number, you're not the first. You're just the first to file. There was a link, shortened, no preview image. She didn't click it. She screenshotted, forwarded it to her lawyer with a single line, we need to talk about threats, then shoved both phones into her purse and told the driver to change destination. Not home, she said. Anywhere with a lock and coffee. Inside the county jail, the television in the day room was tuned to a local station running a split screen, B-roll of the bistro with a lower third that read, court oversight issued, and footage of Jasmine's heels on wet marble. A few inmates clapped like they were at a boxing match. Kirk stood by the water fountain, plastic cup halfway to his mouth, staring at the crawl of text. For a moment he wasn't the man on a show, he was just a man in a place where time crept. He thought about the note. He thought about the woman who pressed her palm to the glass. He thought about a list of accounts that were supposed to be ghost stories by now and felt the old panic bloom behind his ribs. A guard passed behind him and murmured, 6 o'clock, as if repeating a weather report. He didn't ask what it meant. He knew. Tasha would drop something at 6. Everybody would eat while they watched him burn. The Frost Bistro felt haunted by daylight. The manager stood at the register with an envelope in his hands, the seal already broken and the oxygen gone from the room. The order inside named an independent overseer, a reporting cadence, a clause about unauthorized withdrawals that read like a trapdoor. In the kitchen, a line cook scrolled his phone and found a thread accusing the restaurant of laundering pain into entrees. He put the phone down and picked up a ladle. Orders still had to be plated. Heat still moved through metal. One of the servers called her sister to say she wasn't sure if she should come in tomorrow, and her sister said, girl, people tip bigger during a scandal, and they both laughed for exactly 1 second before going quiet again. At precisely 6, Tasha K filled the screen with a grin that said welcome to the theater and held up a flash drive like a necklace charm. I keep my promises, she purred, then rolled audio, not the clip everyone heard, but the minutes around it, messy, human, unmistakable. Kirk's voice, rough and tight, saying things that were legal words once and now were just knives. Move it before the freeze, and she's not winning, and tell him the name I gave you, he'll know which ledger. The chat detonated. A caller phoned in to say they recognized the ledger code from a story last year about a boutique with a silent partner and a shell company that folded like a paper crane. Another said they worked nights and records and saw docket numbers that didn't line up unless someone had help. Tasha let them talk, then leaned in. Allegedly, she said, elongating each syllable, we about to find out who's been playing Monopoly with real buildings. Rasheeda's lawyer muted his speaker and rewound 3 times, taking notes like a stenographer with a grudge. We can argue prior restraint is off the table, but we can use this for standing on the TRO, he said, already drafting. We tie the violent insinuations to real-world risk and ask the court to enjoin direct or indirect contact, including through third parties and platforms. Rasheeda watched the waveform of Kirk's voice dance across the screen and felt no satisfaction, only calibration. File it by 9, she said. If the clerk's window closes, we drive it to the judge's house. Jasmine's lawyer's office felt like a waiting room for a different planet. The receptionist set a mug down without making eye contact. In the conference room, the lawyer pulled up the complaint on a wall monitor and circled phrases with a laser pointer, specific damages tied to brand deals iced out, a PR firm's emails that read like they were written with a lighter held underneath. This plays, he said, careful, neutral. But you have to understand counterexposure. Discovery cuts both ways. If we go forward, they will ask for everything. Jasmine folded her hands to hide the tremor in her thumbs. Then we give them everything that matters and nothing they can twist into their movie. The lawyer held her gaze for a beat too long. That's not how this works, he said. But it's how we'll try. Outside, the city made a carnival of it. Hashtags took turns wearing the crown, hashtag Jasmine vs Rasheeda, hashtag Frostfiles, hashtag Behind Bars Behind Cash. Anonymous burner accounts posted blurry stills from a jail visiting booth that commenters color-corrected, enhanced, and misidentified with the devotion of amateur detectives and the accuracy of a coin flip. A blogger posted a timeline thread with arrows and red circles and received 20,000 likes and 6 cease and desists, none of which they opened. A podcaster recorded a live take from a car seat and cried twice. A teenager made a dance to the sound of the jail phone beep and got a brand deal overnight. Somewhere, a clerk stamped a file and didn't look up. Somewhere else, a judge rubbed his temple and said, "Set it for the morning." Night pushed its shoulder against the windows and the city creaked. In the jail, a guard called Kirk to the phones and pointed to line 3. The voice on the other end was the woman from the glass, flatter now, more arithmetic than memory. "The name they have isn't the name we used last," she said. "If you try to pull anything with the old code, it will flag in 2 systems. That's not a warning, that's a fact." He stared through the plexiglass partition at his own reflection and tried to remember when he stopped being the man who could improvise without leaving fingerprints. "What do you want?" he asked, softer than he meant to. "To not be mentioned," she said. "To not be collateral. To not be a punchline on a live." The line clicked. For a second he thought she'd hung up, then she returned with a different breath. "There's one ledger you forgot about," she said. "Check the year. You got sloppy." The call cut. He stood with the receiver in his hand pretending he still had a choice. Rasheeda's night was fluorescent. She and her attorneys tuned a declaration like a violin, each sentence painstacked and sworn. A security consultant dialed in to say a convoy and new locks were cheap compared to chaos. "We can timestamp the threats to her personal page and correlate to the live stream drop," the consultant said. "If we want to, we can map the escalation curve for the judge." Miss Charlene scrolled through her contacts and then, without looking up, said, "Post something clean." Rasheeda opened Instagram and typed, then deleted, then typed again, a photo of a handwritten to-do list with every line checked off except the last, "sleep." No caption. The comments filled with crown emojis and chess pieces and 3 words. Repeated until they lost their edges, "Stay the course." Jasmine ended up in a midtown hotel with blackout curtains and complimentary water bottles that tasted like hotel water. She sat on the bed and finally clicked the link from the unknown number on her second phone, but only after turning on screen recording and pointing her primary phone at it like a witness. The video was shaky, shot from a ring light reflection. In a window, a voice distorted to a new gender said dates, totals, and the name of a consultancy no one ever tagged in photos. The final frame froze on a document half visible beneath a hand with a crescent scar. She knew that scar. She had traced it once with a fingertip and called it a bite mark from life. She paused the recording, scrubbed back, and began to make a list. Near midnight, a clerk with tired eyes stamped received on 2 separate stacks, one from Rasheeda's side asking for a temporary restraining order, expedited hearing, and court-monitored communications protocol, one from Jasmine's side filing an amended complaint adding a count tied to interference with a specific vendor contract. The clerk slid both into different trays and checked the docketing software, which blinked a time, 9 a.m., next to the words emergency calendar. The city slept in fragments. The bistro's manager drafted a staff email no hospitality handbook had ever prepared him for. A production assistant at a network emailed a producer a note that said, "If we're smart, we wait to shoot, or we shoot and act surprised." A driver backed a black SUV into a private garage and killed the lights. A person with a tattoo on their hand folded a piece of paper into a smaller square and tucked it into the lining of a coat. Just before dawn, the rain stopped like it had been told to. The streets shone with that washed-clean lie that mornings tell. Jasmine woke to a buzz that wasn't a phone, someone knocking on the hotel door in a polite rhythm. She checked the peephole. A bellman stood with a manila envelope and a pen. "From the desk," he said when she cracked the door. "No sender." Inside the envelope was a single photocopy, an old ledger page with a column circled in red and a name at the bottom that wasn't supposed to be written in ink anywhere. Her breath hiccuped. The phone rang on the bedside table at the same time, her lawyer's name lighting the screen. "Don't bring anything," he said when she answered. "Just come. We're on at 9. Across the city, Rasheeda stepped into a hallway that smelled like coffee and eucalyptus and didn't look back at her phone when it buzzed. Her team would answer. In the county jail, a guard tapped the bars with 2 knuckles and said, "Suit up, Frost. Court bus in 15. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. The bus would do that work. In a studio that could be any studio, Tasha adjusted her lights and told her audience, "If you know, you know. And if you don't, by lunchtime you will." By the time the courthouse opened, the crowd out front made a human corridor. Reporters, argued over inches of curb. A woman with a sign that read "We believe receipts, not reputation" stood on a milk crate and lost her voice to the morning. Inside, the emergency docket clerk stacked files like sacrament. The bailiff opened the double doors to the courtroom, and a gust of hallway noise rushed in before settling into the hush that always comes before a name is called. Somewhere behind the bar, someone slid into a seat and pulled their hood a little. Lower, the crescent of a tattoo briefly visible before the sleeve fell back into place. The judge took the bench and lifted the first file. On the matter of Washington v. Bucknerfrost, he began, peering over his glasses. "Counsel, appearances please." And in that inhale between names, before the record captured who stood for whom and what would be argued, before anyone knew which copy would be the one to matter, Jasmine felt the envelope under her arm grow heavier, Rasheeda felt the weight of 10 perfectly chosen moves settle into one. And Kirk, somewhere on a bench that didn't belong to him, felt the bus hit a dip in the road and understood, finally, that gravity wasn't a metaphor. The air inside the courtroom was colder than the rain outside, the kind of chill that didn't come from the vents but from the weight of what everyone knew was about to happen. Jasmine sat at the plaintiff's table, her posture straight but her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles ached. Across from her, Rasheeda leaned in toward her attorney, lips moving in a whisper that never broke her expression. The judge adjusted his glasses, scanning the docket like he had all the time in the world. The bailiff's voice rang out, "All rise," and for a moment, the room moved in perfect unison before settling again. Tasha K was in the back row. A scarf pulled up just enough to pass as low profile, phone in hand, already live to her audience. Her whisper carried over the faint hum of the HVAC, "Y'all, this is about to be good. Stay tuned." The attorneys traded opening remarks that sounded polite but landed like lead. Jasmine's lawyer painted a picture of a deliberate campaign. Receipts tucked neatly into exhibits, emails allegedly forwarded from Rasheeda's boutique address, text messages laced with warnings to vendors, and a string of social media posts the lawyer claimed were thinly veiled attempts to assassinate my client's character. Rasheeda's counsel rose with a stack of counterarguments, each one laid out like a chess piece moving with purpose. "This is a weaponized lawsuit," he told the court, "meant not for justice but for headlines." His voice was calm, but his eyes flicked toward Jasmine with a sharpness that spoke volumes. In the second row, Miss Charlene shifted in her seat, tapping a manicured finger against her coffee cup like a drumbeat only she could hear. Back in the county jail, Kirk was in the chain gang of orange jumpsuits loaded onto the bus at dawn. Through the narrow glass, he could see the city rolling by, familiar streets blurred by speed and the fog of his own thoughts. The tattooed hand flashed through his mind again, that whispered ledger code, the warning that the old playbook wouldn't work anymore. He knew the courthouse he was heading toward wasn't for his hearing, it was for theirs. And he knew enough about optics to realize the sight of him in cuffs, in the same building as Jasmine and Rasheeda, would be pure gasoline on a fire already burning hot. Inside the courtroom, Jasmine's lawyer called their first witness, a former PR consultant who testified about being approached off the record to circulate negative stories about Jasmine, allegedly at Rasheeda's request. The consultant's voice was steady, but their eyes darted toward the defense table more than once. Rasheeda's lawyer objected on hearsay, the judge sustained, but the seed was planted. Tasha K's chat lit up with speculation, emojis of flames and popcorn filling the feed. "Y'all heard that," she murmured into her mic. She didn't say the name, but we all know who she meant. When the recess bell rang, the hallway erupted. Reporters surged toward both sides, cameras jostling, mics extended like weapons. Rasheeda walked straight through without a glance, her attorney shielding her path. Jasmine paused just long enough for a single line, "This isn't about reality TV anymore. This is about reality." The soundbite hit social media before she even reached the elevator, looping on timelines with captions that turned her words into rallying cries. In a holding room upstairs, Kirk sat shackled to a bench, a deputy at the door. He could hear the echoes of the crowd in the hallway, the reporters calling out names. A young guard leaned in, pretending to check his cuffs, and whispered, "They're talking about you down there. Audio from the bus is already on a blog." Kirk's jaw tightened. If that was true, then even his transport had become part of the narrative. The guard straightened and walked away, leaving him in the hum of fluorescent lights and the steady tick of the wall clock back on the record. Rasheeda's team went on offense. They introduced evidence of Jasmine's own public statements, screenshots, interviews, podcast clips, arguing that Jasmine had been just as active in fueling the public feud. Defamation, the lawyer said, is not a one-way street. The tension ratcheted up with every objection, every sustained motion. At one point, the judge leaned forward and told both sides, "This courtroom is not your social media platform. Keep it on the law." But everyone knew the law was only half the battle here. Outside, the Frost Bistro was swarming again. Protesters And supporters had set up opposite corners, one side chanting for Jasmine's win, the other calling for Rasheeda to hold her ground. The independent manager sent a terse email to both legal teams. The restaurant's reservations were spiking, but so were the refund requests for gift cards. The brand was a battlefield now, and every customer was picking a side. By late afternoon, the judge called it for the day. No rulings yet, just orders for more evidence, more filings, more of everything to keep the machine turning. Jasmine exited. First, flanked by her lawyer and a security guard who scanned the crowd with military precision. Rasheeda followed minutes later, sunglasses on, head high, a studied calm in every step. Tasha K's stream caught both exits, narrating like a sportscaster, her voice dropping when she noticed someone in the crowd, hood up, sleeve pulled back just enough to reveal that crescent-shaped tattoo. "There's your wild card," she told her viewers. "Remember that hand. You'll see it again." That night, the city hummed with aftershocks. In her hotel room, Jasmine opened the manila envelope again, laying the photocopied ledger page flat under the lamp. She traced the circled column with her fingertip, memorizing the name written in ink at the bottom. Across town, Rasheeda sat in her boutique's back office, scrolling through the day's coverage, saving the clips where she looked composed, deleting the ones where her jaw twitched. In the jail, Kirk lay on his bunk staring at the ceiling. The sound of the courtroom still echoing in his ears, the smell of the rain from that morning lingering in his mind. Just before midnight, 3 separate phones lit up in 3 separate rooms with the same message from an unlisted number. "Tomorrow, the game changes. Be ready." No name, no signature, just the words. Jasmine read it twice before setting her phone face down. Rasheeda read it once and smirked like she'd been expecting it. Kirk closed his eyes and felt the weight of every move left to play. Somewhere in the city, under a flickering street lamp, the tattooed hand slid a fresh envelope into a mailbox and walked away without looking back.